Hello, and welcome to Allie and CoCo's Kids Science Show. Today, we are going to talk about the chemistry of cooking. Yes, cooking is in fact a chemistry. When you mix two things together and they create one different thing, you have made a chemical reaction take place. So if you think about it, you put a bunch of ingredients together, you get something new. You've done chemistry. Today, we're going to talk about something that I used to have problems with all the time, the difference between baking soda and baking powder. So today, we are going to make chocolate chip cookies. We're going to follow the recipe on the back of this opened Nestle's Toll House bag of chocolate chips. I was just testing them to make sure they were fine. They are. So we're going to follow what the directions on the back of the bag are. The back of the bag calls for baking soda. So that's going to be our control. A control group is a group that you use to compare what you change in your experiment. We can only change one thing at a time. If we change two, we don't know which change made the gooier cookie or the awesomer cookie. So we're going to change one thing at a time, and we're going to compare it to the control group. After that, we're going to make a cakey cookie. That's going to be made using baking powder instead of baking soda. But then just for fun, after we compare these two, we might as well use both baking soda and baking powder and make cookies with a gooey center and crispier outer ring. So, let's get cooking. We're going to start off with a half cup of flour, 1/4 of a teaspoon of the baking soda, a 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Salt's really cool. You would think that like, oh, I'm trying to make sweet cookies, I don't want to put salt in it. It actually takes bitterness out of your baked goods. It's always good to add a little bit of salt to make the sweet stuff pop out. And then a 1/4 of a cup of butter. I've previously kind of partially melted this butter. I've softened it. A 1/4 of a cup of granulated or the white sugar. Boop. And a 1/4 of a cup of the brown sugar. Good girl. So I never got to tell you what that baking soda was all about. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. Sodium bicarbonate. Thank you, Colette. The brown sugar is an acid. Baking soda is a base. They're acids and bases. It's like heads and tails of a coin. Now, if you mix two together, they're going to react. And when you have a chemical reaction, sometimes you'll have bubbles form. So think of like baking soda and vinegar. When you mix the two and you make the volcano, then you have a chemical reaction taking place. Those bubbles that form are carbon dioxide, the same stuff we breathe out of our lungs. So when you have those two mixed, when you have the baking soda and the brown sugar mixed together, you are having a chemical reaction take place. But be careful. So you have to have an acid and a base in your recipe for those bubbles to form. And when those bubbles start forming, you're going to have your cake or your cookie poof up. That's what kind of makes it light and airy on the inside. Now, here's a tricky part. I'm making the same Toll House recipe, but I didn't want to make 5 dozen cookies. What am I going to do with 60 cookies times 3? Oh, that's a lot of cookies. Cut it in quarters. I have to get half of an egg. Divide this in half. She doesn't care. So it's very serious. So, that looks, hey, can you stay up here with me? That looks about half. Whoa. Delicious. My recipe calls for a 1/4 of a cup of chocolate chips, but I really like chocolate, so I'm just going to put in a 1/2 of a cup. I would say don't judge me, but sweet cocoa bean. Chocolate's one of my favorite things in the world. It does come from cocoa plants, which is a bean pod, cocoa bean. Baking soda is that sodium bicarbonate. Baking powder is the sodium bicarbonate, the baking soda, but it also has extra acids in it, so it reacts quicker. Hey, don't eat the sugar. Okay, now I have 9 cookies, and they're going right in the oven for 11 minutes at 375 degrees. We're keeping everything constant. All right, Colette. So now we are going to make our cakey cookie. That was the control, baking soda. The one we're comparing the baking powder version to. Add 1/4 of a teaspoon. Let me frantically look for these again. That is a teaspoon. Number is the exact same as our control cookie, but this time, instead of baking soda, we've added baking powder. This is our experimental group. So the experimental group is the one that you're like, what was going to happen if I change this? Now when you make that kind of assumption or question, that is called a hypothesis. So my hypothesis is that if I add baking powder, it's going to be cakey. I may have gone a little insane on chocolate. 6 chocolate chip cookies with baking powder instead of baking soda. Colette's going for it. Now it is time for our final group of cookies. Now, you can have as many different test groups as you want, but you have to have a control group. I'm gonna crack a few yolks today. Cocoa Bean, do you want to come back to the show? Now here comes the next experimental part. We're going to add an eighth of a teaspoon of baking powder and an eighth of a teaspoon of baking soda. We've added both leavenings this time. I have cookie all over my hand, but let me just bring you guys over here to see the cooling process. These are the control cookies with the baking soda. You can see how they're flatter. They look delicious. Now another thing I've read, that baking soda instead of baking powder makes your cookies a little browner. Now these are in the oven the same amount of time, same level of the rack. We have a much browner cookie than these are the baking powder cookies. So the ends got a little weird. That's okay. But look how much thicker they are, much more poofed up, and they're lighter. And remember, you gotta keep everything constant, so everything's been in there 11 minutes at 375 degrees. Now always remember, if you are at home and you don't know how to work, oh jeez, everything's fine. Now we have the final product of our cookies. Let's check it out. All right, so back to this. We have our control group, which is the Toll House recipe with baking soda. We have our first experimental group with the baking powder. Notice how it's poofed up. pretty big. Now this is quite surprising. This is our final experimental group. We have baking soda and baking powder. It's pretty gooey in there. Yeah. So the ones over here with baking powder, definitely not as gooey as this. We've done it. 3 different cookies, only changing the baking soda or baking powder ratio. So just hang tight and we're gonna taste test it, okay? Okay, so now we have a taste tester here to taste the cookies. So go ahead and pick whichever one, any order, doesn't count, doesn't matter, go for it.
I'm gonna do yellow.
Go for it. Just go for it. What does it taste like? Describe it.
Crispy.
Crispy.
Crunchy.
Cool.
A little bit, maybe salty.
Maybe I put too much salt in.
Good though, I like it.
Do you need milk? Do you need to clear your palate?
It's a heavier cookie, just the weight wise, and it's thicker.
Thicker. That's interesting.
It's sort of soft inside.
Soft inside. Okay, and the last one.
This one's really thick. Look at the
Dense.
difference.
Whoa.
But it's heavier.
Is that the heaviest one?
Mm-hmm.
The squishiest one? She looks unhappy.
It's soft. It's not crispy. It's real thick, and it's got a lot of inside. It's real thick right here.
Cool. So, the one that was the crispy one, the yellow plate.
That I like the best.
You like this one the best? This is the one with baking soda. So that's the Toll House cookie. That's the control. The red one was one, oh man, with the baking powder. So that one was supposed to be squishier on the inside. And then, oops, dog hair. This one is the half baking soda, half baking powder. So it's supposed to be crispy on the outside and gooey on the inside. And it was definitely gooey on the inside.
And it's really thick.
Really thick. So, that's good. I like this one the best. Everything else was the same though. So the only thing we changed was baking soda or baking powder. Pretty cool. So, that's all for today. Bye! Bag. CoCo, bag. Bang! That was pathetic. Bang! Yeah! Who's the cutest dog in the world? Colette is sniffing all the ingredients that we have here on the table. She's just making sure they're all good. They are. Yeah.